So, speaking of Darrell, how goes things?
Oh, weirdly.
Weirdly?
hmm
Tell me about it.
Oh, well, I've just been in bed a lot because of this whole COVID thing.
Still feeling crap?
No, the all the really awful symptoms, which it's funny, I thought it was a sinus infection Monday through, I guess, Wednesday or Thursday of last week, but the all the really nasty stuff kind of was gone by Thursday. Just really fatigued, intensely fatigued.
Yeah,
So, but each day gets a little bit better. So,
good.
um, and Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I was like, forget it. Just stayed in bed and, um, got up when I had to and would do whatever I needed to do, or at least for as long as I was able to last. And then when I finally hit a wall, I'm like, okay, I'm back to the bedroom.
Yeah, yeah.
But the interesting thing is, it hit me, I guess it was over the weekend, that I wasn't having any reactions to being sick. And
Amazing.
for a long time, I was really um, not sure what the right word is. Not afraid, but I can't think of the word. But anyway, there was this real strong sense of, oh, I can't get sick. God, I don't want to get sick, and that's been with me since, oh, I guess it was around 20, 2010 or 2011. I got sick multiple times in a period of about 4 months. I just kept getting sick over and over, which is weird for me because,
Yeah,
typically I get sick once about every 4 or 5 years.
yeah.
And so since then, like if somebody in the house catches something, stay away from me. I don't want to get sick. It's like it's the worst thing that can happen to you.
I know.
And but then it occurred to me over the weekend that I was just kind of rolling with it.
Amazing.
Because once I got sick, it would be like beating on the walls, of the room you're trapped in,
Yeah.
and that wasn't happening. I just kind of resigned myself, or not even really resigned myself. I just kind of went along and like, okay, well, I get to do a lot of reading, which I haven't been able to do a lot of reading for a very long time.
There you
And
go.
so I get to do a lot of reading. And of course, like you mentioned, you can also use that as time for inquiry. Anytime well, not anytime, but frequently when something would come up, if there was a reaction to something, I'd use that as an opportunity to just lay there and spend some time seeing what I could find out.
Yeah.
So it's kind of curious that the strong, I guess, it seems incomplete, but I'll say strong aversion to being ill seems to have finally taken its leave.
Amazing. That's a
So
really big thing.
you say that again?
So that's a really big thing because there's so much discomfort involved with being sick, and this idea that there's did you have you had you pinned down while it was there? Was it a fear of discomfort? Was it a fear of getting sick and dying? Is it a fear of not being productive? Did you have a sense of what that was from?
Yeah, it's more the latter. For a long time, for as long as I can remember, my attitude has been, you can sleep when you're dead.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, people talk a lot lately about the fear of missing out, and if they're during daylight hours, there are things that I could be doing, and I'd rather be doing that than laying in bed. You know, and of course, the discomfort also probably plays into it too. I mean, no one really enjoys that.
No. Curious though, since you brought it up, this feeling of needing to be productive, where what would happen if you weren't? What would happen if you stopped? Because even notice, when you were sick, it was still a time to be productive reading. There was still not a lack of productivity there. You just shifted what the focus of the productivity was. So what would happen if you literally stayed in bed for a week and did absolutely nothing and wasted all of that time?
Well, I think after a while it would become tiresome of
Yeah.
just laying there.
even before that, just take one day. You could
Okay.
last one day. All right. So what would come up with the idea that you could be doing things, but you're not?
Hmm. It's really so strange to be drawing a blank. Usually I can get a sense of something.
Yeah.
Um, I really don't know. Um, I guess it would probably, it seems like it's about restlessness,
Okay.
about wanting to be up and be active, being moving around. I mean, I'm not saying there's not something underneath that. It's just for as long as I can remember, I mean, from my earliest days, um, I don't do well with sitting still.
So it's a curious thing. So it's not that there's an idea of productivity that needs to be maintained. Like you have stuff that really needs to be done that you should really be doing. It's that it's a defense from actually feeling the restlessness that's there if you don't do the things, whatever the things are.
Possibly so. Um, I mean, I don't know how much of it's just kind of natural, innate, and how much of it might be something else. I mean, um, as a kid, um, I was really, they probably would have diagnosed me as ADD or ADHD,
Okay.
uh, because I was just so full of energy and constantly on the go. And I remember hearing a lot from my mom and relatives, sit still, quit fidgeting.
Yeah.
And I spoke so fast that I spent my first year of school in speech therapy just so people could understand me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So there's I guess I would have been called hyperactive,
Okay.
at least. So, um, I don't know how much of it that plays into it and how much of it might be something else. Um,
Well, what does it feel like when you are just actually uh sitting down and not doing anything? Like, does it in that moment, does it feel particularly irritating or uncomfortable in some way?
hmm. Well, it can be a mix. There are times where it feels good to sit, and yeah, and maybe this is just a result of partly getting older and also learning to value being still through meditating over the years.
Hmm.
But I can't say this for sure. I would have to start paying attention to what's happening in the moment to verify this. But it seems like there probably are times where it feels like sitting in a car and putting one foot on the accelerator and the other foot on the brake.
Good analogy. Um, that analogy has with it a real sense of inner turmoil, like
Hmm.
that real inner conflict of both wanting to move and wanting to sit still. Like there's a
Hmm.
feeling of yeah, very competing ends. And so do you feel that when you're because even sitting to do meditation is still doing. There's still,
Uh,
you know, even though you're technically just sitting there, it's still being done for a purpose. You're still even if it's just shamatha, you're just sitting, that is itself a specified behavior. It's a specified action that you have classified as now I'm going to go and sit and do nothing for an hour. But
Right. Yeah. Good point.
but even that is still a type of classified doing that has a justification to it.
Hmm. So what was your question again?
So does it feel like when you are really doing nothing, like not even shikantaza, like just sitting in your chair right there, gazing off into space, does that feel like there's a conflict? Like part of you is like, I should be getting up and doing something. This doesn't feel right. I feel, irritated in some way, or are you just okay to just gaze at a wall for the next 6 hours?
Boy, I'd have to actually experiment with that. I'd have to go sit down somewhere without putting a purpose on it, like meditating, and sit there without doing anything for a while. And I've never done that, and I haven't really paid attention to it. Um, I mean, but there's obviously something going on because I can only sit still for so long before I get up and do something.
Mm. And see what that is that is causing that getting up. Is that there is a feel into the body first of all, and see if there's an underlying discomfort somewhere in the body that feels like the gas pedal and brake pedal being on at the same time, that it feels like there's an internal turbulence of some sort, and it might be very subtle, but notice if there's something going on in the body that feels irritating, uncomfortable, distasteful in some way, and then notice if there are thoughts that pop up of, oh, could go take the garbage out, could go walk the dogs, could go, and all those things, which are ways for the mind to say, okay, well, if you do this, then you won't have to feel that anymore. Do this, and then this will get you out of this. And they're like little suggestions, like advertisements. It's like walking down the street, and it's kind of like I think of one of those like dystopian future movies where they're like walking through the shitty city with like just digital advertisements everywhere, like calling out to you for something. And it's kind of that. It's like this, you have this uncomfortable dystopian feeling, and then you just have all of these flashy, garish thoughts that are like, well, come here, come here, come here, buy this, do this, and then we'll distract you from it. And it's that.
Um, well, one thing that does just kind of cross my mind, and I think there's probably a mix here because this has been something that goes back to, you know, probably age, 2, 3, 4, as soon as I could walk.
Yeah.
And I don't want to dismiss or diminish that, but there is something that is more recent that I know is at work there, and that is that I left my the work I did in 2013, I think it was, to stay home so that there would be someone at home for our daughter,
Mm.
rather than just keeping her cooped up in daycare all year long.
Yeah.
Or, when she wasn't in school, because that was around the time she was starting school. And so I've been the person who's responsible for everything in the house. And I have noticed that there are times where there's this sense of, if I'm not doing something, that I feel it's not quite, it doesn't seem to be guilt exactly. I'm not sure what the word is for it, but there's a sense of, if I'm not doing something to make sure things are taken care of in the house, whatever that might be, then I can't find the word for it, but I can describe it by this. If my wife and daughter are gone, whether it's for an afternoon or, occasionally they've gone out of town for one thing or another, I actually can sit more because I don't feel like I have to be on duty. I feel like I kind of get a bit of a break. And so, and the funny thing is, because I'm as much as I'm performing for them, I'm also performing for myself, because there's this sense of, my wife works a
Mhm.
lot, and her job can be pretty demanding, and there's an uncomfortable feeling around the idea of, she does that 5 days a week, sometimes sadly more, and I'm getting to take it easy, you know. So I know that whole thing, that complex, is part of it. I'm sure there's older stuff there that I'm unaware of, but I do know that that's operative.
So, before I forget it, can you finish the sentence that you started and then you kind of went off a different direction, didn't finish it?
Okay.
If I don't forget how you started the sentence, but it was basically like, if I don't take care of everything in the house, then, and you never gave me the then, what would happen if you weren't actually on top of everything in the house?
Well, two things come to mind immediately. One is, um, things can get out of control pretty quickly around here, with a lot of dogs and two other people, and one of them being a teenager. Um, the other thing is, I think it's what I just described a minute ago. Then I feel guilt or regret or shame or something, about the fact that I'm not holding up my end of things, in light of how much my wife invests in making sure that the financial end of everything is taken care of.
And so on one hand, uh it sounds like there's like a sense of responsibility, which is maybe
Yeah,
a word that, you couldn't find, if that makes sense. Because it sounds like that's kind of the first thing, is that you feel like you're responsible for maintaining the house and maintaining a sense of stability and lack of chaos in your sometimes chaotic surroundings. Um,
that's interesting to note.
and
Well, I'll finish that idea once you've finished what you're
yeah,
saying.
yeah, and then the feeling of like that guilt that comes up, that she's working so much and you feel like you have to show that you are working equally hard in the house, so that, well, this is the question, is it, because I know you feel bad about it, so is part of it to prove to yourself that you are working hard and suffering equally to her? Because that's really what it comes down to, right? It would be okay if she was working in a job that she loved and like couldn't wait to go every morning, and then was happy to be there and then sad that she was home. But it's the fact that she works in a job that is difficult and she's working a lot of hours and not happy with it, so she's suffering at this job. And so there's like the feeling that you have to suffer equally to balance the scales. Otherwise, there's guilt that you're not suffering enough to make her suffering. Uh, how do I put that? You know what I'm getting at.
Yeah. Um, I don't know about, I'm not sure about the idea of a commiserate suffering between the two of us, but, and that may be right. I don't know.
No, I'm floating it out there to see how that sits.
But even if we subtract her from the equation, all the rest of it, yes. I don't know exactly what drives it, but there is definitely a sense of responsibility, and I have to be on.
Yeah.
Uh, so yes, to that.
So you can look into there, if there is a feeling of suffering and guilt around that, we need to really look into that feeling of the doing. That brings us back to that feeling of doership, that feeling that it is up to you to maintain the environment in such a way that, um, you know what is best, that you know how to go about arranging things such that the dogs are not freaking out and your teenage daughter is happy and content, and that the house doesn't fall down around you. um there is a lot of self implicated in that uh has a lot of things of
No, don't chew on that. Leave that alone. You have that.
I feel like
Talk about, huh?
this is a perfect illustration, I think, of what we're talking about. It's that constantly having to be in a management position of trying to keep everything from going the way that they're going.
But hang on, I have to get it completely out of her reach, otherwise she's going to destroy this thing.
What is she eating?
It is a stand for video cameras,
Oh, okay.
which I never had any idea they were so tasty.
Apparently, they're rubbing them with rawhide before they ship them out of the
Now I wonder what next.
Uh-huh.
She's on a tear. Anyway, so let's see if we can continue with that.
Yeah. So I want you to going forward, take a look at when it feels like, okay, she's eating this stand. I have to do this. There are a couple things there. One is like we talked about in our whenever we talked about it, um, the being really aware of everything that's in that moment of feeling like there is a you who has to get up and move this out of the way and you know put it where she can't get to it. It's not saying not to do the action, but it's being very aware during the action as to, sorry, I gotta sneeze, as to uh, what feels like the doership in that action, and then noticing that it is just one action. Getting up and moving that out of the way is one thing. There is, however, this collection of memories and collection of projections of the future, which is taking that instant and adding it to all the other times that you had to move something so a dog didn't chew on it, all the other times that you have had to have do whatever the things are that you do with your daughter to keep things at peace, everything that you have done to keep the house functioning, all of those things which are separate events that have nothing to do with each other are being compiled in a way that it creates this narrative where you have to be the manager, which is currently happening, right?
Yes.
It's compiling the story of need for responsibility and the need for management. When you could actually look at it as this is a discrete event, another discrete event, another discrete event, without that thread tying them all together into a quilt. And then the dog wants to go out. So then that instant of getting up to let the dog out is seen as something where I am not, "Ugh, I got to do that." And then, no, just be curious about the experience. What is it actually taking to get up? When does the body do it? What does that impetus feel like that is actually saying, now is the moment I have to do it? What is lifting the body out of the chair to do it? Is there a thought presaging it or prefacing it? Is there a, um, just be really curious of what's showing up as the action happens, and then recognize that that is one action that has happened and is done and has nothing to do with any other actions that are going to follow it or anything that has come before.
So, two things. One, also notice that it's impossible to find the moment of decision.
Yeah. Oh,
And then the other thing is, in what you were saying, um, the fact that in going to do something, there's this kind of running narrative, even if it's only, and this is how it frequently shows up, even if it's only, here we go again.
yeah,
That's enough to create this arc of a narrative that spans who knows how much time.
exactly. Yeah. And all it is one discrete action, one discrete event, and noticing every time it connects to, oh, this again, and here we go again. it's putting it into a line of just an absolute insufferably long and difficult train of things, and it's literally creating something out of nothing. You're creating a whole story and a whole narrative out of one discrete event, and then a bunch of vague half memories of other times that were vaguely similar, right?
One moment.
Observe it all.
I'm there with you.
You're good.
It's like something out of a movie.
The mass exodus just out.
And it's interesting because what went along with it was this not fully formed verbal. I mean, it wasn't entirely in language. It was sort of vague and misty, sort of half words of how many times have I done this?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And yet it's irrelevant. It's like
Hmm.
even every time you pick up a guitar, you don't think about how many times have I picked up a guitar. Oh my God, this has got to be like my 50,000th time of picking up a guitar. I am so tired of picking up guitars. No, because there's something there that you enjoy doing. There's it has nothing to, it's like this is like the first time you ever picked it up, except that you have all of the skills that you've amassed over years of playing guitar. So it's because there is an inherent not wanting that situation that we immediately turn to, oh, it's that again. And it's that thing that I didn't like then and I don't like it now. And how many more times am I going to have to do that thing again? And it's all in that one, like this again, you know?
And there is a huge story that's been concocted around a lot of this stuff um, of somebody who is or has been put into a difficult position and always having to be on duty and bailing people out.
Yeah. So see where that push comes from. There's the story end of it, which we were just talking about dissecting. So you can get
Mm-hmm.
rid of that part of it and just be with every individual instance when somebody needs something. But see, in the instance when you do have to bail somebody out, what is the push there? What is making you feel like you have to be the one to bail them out? Are you getting something out of the deal? And it might not be an obvious thing, but there's something which is being uh even to the extent where if I don't do it, I'm going to feel super guilty and awful in the body, and if I do it, I hate doing it, I don't want to do it, but at least I won't feel this discomfort of guilt. It could be something that's even that kind of a negative positive.
Okay. I think we've arrived at the point where I need to start a new journal. Seriously, I think I need to start keeping track of this stuff.
Yeah, I think it would be really really insightful. And the mass exodus comes in the other way. Hilarious.
Apparently, what it was not enough because now they're back here.
Exactly. Exactly. The dissatisfaction we talked about last time. Right?
Yes. Yes. Okay. All right. All right. Um, well, I never thought I'd wind up working with this.
Yeah, there you go. It's
It's
all
interesting that it's come up.
it's all grist for the mill. It's all something there that because it all relates to the same places. There's still this feeling of there's a feeling of identification in all of these stories and in all of the issues of whether it's not being good enough or the scapegoating or being the one who everybody relies upon and who you have to hold everything together. um you have to bail other people out. It's all coming from that same basic starting point.
And that's what we're trying to discover.
Well, it helps to discover it. And then, like I was saying to Kristen, that it's not about, it's like you discover it, you feel into it. It's not about getting rid of, or it's not about reinforcing the storylines of why it is the way it is, or playing into any of that. It's just recognizing, oh, this is the sensation of shame that I have always felt, or this is the sensation of guilt that is just a constant trigger. Being with it, recognizing that it has been the driver of so many of your behaviors, and recognizing, why am I doing this behavior now? Somebody calls you and they need a ride to the airport. Well, okay. Am I doing it because I genuinely happy to drive them to the airport? Am I doing it because I'd feel guilty if I don't? And it feels worse to feel guilty than it does to get up at 4 a.m. to drive somebody to the airport. Where is your actual motivation for everything you do?
Well, that goes back to something you said. I wanted you to clarify. You said find the basic starting point. So, what is it we're trying to ferret out?
In this regard, it's coming back to, like, we know that you have some basic starting point stuff that of being always told that you're wrong and not being good enough, or like you've had that scapegoat thing where everybody kind of, blamed everything on you, and you have to kind of bear everything for everybody else um to feel okay with their discomfort. It's like, well, if it's your fault and you take it on yourself, then they don't have to look at their own shit. Then you've taken the weight for them, and they can just put everything on you. And it's basically the same pattern that is currently manifesting.
Well, in a strange way, it seems like it's kind of reversing it. It seems like it's the opposite of what I grew up with. Whereas, growing up, it was, well, everything would be fine in this house if it wasn't for him.
Yeah.
Um, Now it's, what are we going to do without him?
And notice, though, if it feels like you have to put everything on you, because that is still the comfortable, uncomfortable thing that you're used to. As a child, you were used to having everything put on you. And now, does it feel weird if you don't have everything on your shoulders?
I don't know. I'll have to look at that. I mean, I know there's been a lot of talk in recent months about doing things to um, take a lot of the burden off of me and make sure things are shared more equally in the house and get more help and support from my wife and daughter.
Yeah.
And I'm fine with that. The only thing is it's just hard to break the habit, you know?
And why is that? What is underneath that habit? Are you doing that habit because it is keeping you in that similar pattern of behavior where,
Well, go ahead.
well, because we know there it happens where people who grow up in like abusive households, like children, mistake abuse for love. They don't know that one isn't the same as the other, and that you can have a very healthy, compassionate, caring love without the abuse element, because to them, they just didn't learn it. And so for you, even though it was very uncomfortable being the scapegoat and looking back on it, seeing that, is there some element of comfort in the familiar, or something to do with that, where it's actually still easier to live from that place of having to be the pack mule, um rather than being okay just giving up the reins and not working as much, not struggling to hold everything together for everybody else and taking it all upon yourself.
Well, a couple of interesting details. One is that one of the reasons why the habit is not so easily broken is because there are times where I'll go to do something and I'll ask my daughter to help, and it's fine. Yeah. Or you know what? I'll take care of it here in a little bit. I am. Um,
It feels very much on point.
yeah. I'm going to shake my head. Um, so there are times where asking my daughter for help, it's a case of, it's easier to just go and do this and get it knocked out rather than ask her for help because she's liable to get pissy and be difficult, and I don't want to deal with that.
Is that okay though? I mean, is it okay for her to be pissy and difficult and still do the thing if it helps?
Well, yeah, it is. It's just sometimes it's easier to just do it and get it done than it is to arm wrestle somebody to get them to assist. And
Yeah.
so in other words, it takes less effort and energy to just go and do it and get it knocked out rather than add an extra amount of energy and effort and however much time, a few minutes or so, to have to wrangle with somebody. I was like, I'm just going to do it and get it done. I can be done quicker that way.
I know the feeling of that and I completely understand that, but also see if that is still a defense from
Uh,
allowing other people to do the thing.
oh you raise an interesting point because growing up, there was it was not unusual to um, want to do things to avoid conflict, having upsetting either of my parents,
Yeah, exactly.
which goes along with another little piece of information that may be uh, may shine some light on things, and that is, my wife and I know we have known each other since we were teenagers, and she can remember my room at the house I grew up in, and it was so clean and organized, and everything in its place, and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And a therapist many years ago had pointed out that she felt like that was a defense against all the chaos in the house. And it feels right. When she said that, I thought, yeah, that feels right. And so there was this move to control my environment since I couldn't do anything else, do anything about the other things that were going on in the house out there.
Yeah.
And so I kind of have to wonder how much of that's rolling over into present day.
Yeah. It's a really good point. Um, so much of this is our way of still trying not to feel bad in one way or another. And so if your daughter being, pissy and
Mm-hmm.
difficult causes you discomfort, well, let's look
Mm-hmm.
into why it's not okay for her to be pissy and difficult and for you to be perfectly content with her taking 2 hours to do the job that would have taken you 10 minutes and complaining the whole way, but giving her the opportunity to also learn how to do something, to, be be independent or you know and to for yourself to have that opportunity to um recognize that it doesn't all have to be on you, and see if there is some resistance to not having it all be on you.
Hmm. I'm having to make notes of this.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting questions. I would have never even thought to ask that question.
Amazing. I'll be curious to see what comes out of them.
Yeah. And looking at this in the moment, of course, is necessary, but it also seems like some of these questions require sitting down and spending some time with them.
Yeah. Yeah, and especially feeling into, in the moment is great because you can really feel into what is happening in the body in that moment. Where is the contraction? Is there some sort of discomfort? Is there a thought, like if you ask your daughter to do something and she's being very difficult about it, what do you feel in the body in response to her being difficult or pissy or whatever in that way? And then um what are the thoughts that are deflecting from that? Is it, "Oh, it's just easier to do it myself," and this feeling of resignation? Is it a feeling of, um, is there it would be interesting, is there a feeling of like validation or, yeah, see, I knew it, or that sort of thing when you go to do it, that there's that kind of like, yes, I've justified in why I do it all the time by myself and don't ask for anybody's help. And this is the reason why. see if you feel anything like that that shows up. And it's a really good pointer to what is driving the ship.
Fortunately, we record these things so I can go back
Yeah.
and write more of this down, but it seems like a lot to remember.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. This will be another listen through and transcribe kind of thing. But there's a lot there.
Yeah, I'm sure there is. Well, the timing on this is interesting because something that I've been mulling over since last night was an exchange that we had shortly before bed.
Mm,
Uh, it was getting time to start getting ready for bed, and I let my daughter know that she needed to get off the phone. And when I did that, she had this really strong reaction, and um, this detail may or may not be important, but I noticed that when she has these reactions, what comes up mentally is that she's reacting like a little kid,
yeah.
which I think is actually a fair assessment.
Yeah.
It is very much a kind of reaction that is, she's 16 and it's like someone half her age.
Yeah.
And so there was a really strong reaction to it. And um, I wound up retaliating by letting her know that if that's how she's going to do things, because I wasn't going to try to fight with her to get off the phone. Like, okay, you want to be on the phone, fine. Then you stay on the phone. I'm not gonna have that battle.
Yeah.
But if you're not in bed at the time when you need to be, then you lose your phone time for tomorrow. And while I wasn't raising my voice, I wasn't loud about it. There was a lot of energy in that moment.
Yeah.
And I've been thinking about that from time to time since last night because of the fact that one, it was a reaction,
Yeah.
and two, it was a form of retaliation.
Yeah.
And there's just sort of this understanding that retaliation is never. It's not. Hate to generalize it with such vague language, but it's not okay.
I know what you mean. Um, Curious though, what was it about her being, acting like an 8-year-old that is problematic to you? Why does that feel like a problem?
Hmm. It seems like it's something around the idea of she's 16 and there's this desire or need to deal with somebody at a 16-year-old level rather than having to deal with somebody acting like they're approximately 8 years old. We've already been down that road. We shouldn't be having to go back to that. That's years behind us.
But why in you is that a problem? There's something in you that doesn't want that to be the case.
I'm having a hard time pinning that down. The only thing I can tell you is that when she reacts like that, there is this kind of a startle response. Uh,
Mhm. Bye, Kristen. Good seeing you.
there's a startle response. Um, and when she reacts like that, it feels uncomfortable. Um, it's, I don't know, it's just unpleasant.
Mm.
And I think what I said to her this morning might be kind of telling, because what I told her was, I said, when you react like that, um, I wish I could remember how I put it to her. The gist of it was, when she reacts like that, um, it, instead of talking to me about it and negotiating something, it makes it possible to work out a solution rather than having to have this unpleasantness.
Hmm.
Um, I could be wrong, but I wonder if it's just about the fact that there's a startle response, a little bit of adrenaline, a little bit of a shock,
Yeah,
and not wanting to do that.
it can absolutely be that. And it's a really reasonable thing to say to her, but notice, for your own part, is it because you are feeling startled and uncomfortable? Is there something else involved with it? So rather than just saying that, we've been through that, we don't want to have to deal with her acting out of that again, recognize. Yeah.
I think there's an expectation. I think there's a previously unconscious expectation that she's 16, she should act like a 16-year-old.
Yeah. 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 Perfect. So really be aware of all of these underlying expectations and assumptions. And it's again that what's here now is not what I want. I expected it to be a 16-year-old. Right now I have an 8-year-old. I don't want that, and be really honest with what shows up. And then is it okay? Really, why? What in this moment is not okay about her acting like an 8-year-old? And not in a conscious, not in a cerebral kind of cognitive way where, well, if she does this and then she won't have a good life, or don't go down that road. Look at right now in this actual experience. Why is this for you not an okay thing? We're bringing it always back to you.
Right? Okay.
You have a lot of homework.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, there's now I'm seeing that there really is an increased need for greater and greater awareness. Not being aware in the moment. Um, you, at the very least, you wind up with missed opportunities,
Yeah,
but also it can create problems like we saw last night.
absolutely so. Yeah.
Because that really pissed her off. It
I'm
really
sure.
pissed her off.
I'm sure. So nothing good came out of that for either of you in the moment, except that we have something to talk about now, and perhaps you'll get to have some really big insight out of this.
Hopefully so.
Yeah.
Well, and hopefully it opens a door towards, or a door to, um, being able to diffuse some of what drives these reactions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I could live without the reactions.
Absolutely. And that's what we're working on. So, but awareness of the roots of them can be really helpful in disarming them going forward. So, it's good to know why you're reacting, to know why you don't have to react. Otherwise, it's just this kind of vague idea that, but I have to do this because that, but we don't really know what it is. So
Right.
now we're seeing, oh, I actually don't have to react to that. I'm feeling something in the body. There was a startle response. Wasn't happy with that. Had an expectation that she was going to act older than she was, or as old as she is, or what I think is appropriate for a 16-year-old to act. Her actions did not match up with my conception of how a 16-year-old acts. Turns out some 16-year-olds do act like that. You didn't recognize that at the time. Now you
Well,
do.
especially when they're on the spectrum.
Exactly. And that's the thing is, that is something where you can be childlike in certain ways your whole life. There are parts of that that also change how people react for better or for worse. There are some delightful childlike aspects to people on the spectrum that they maintain throughout their life. And then for some people, there are also what we take to be the more negative aspects, which is also very difficult for them because they can't control um, the overwhelming, just the overwhelming feelings and sensations that they have, in situations like that. So, um, it's good
Mm.
to it's good to have the compassion behind it for, her experience, but then we always bring it back to what is it about you that makes it so that it's not okay for her to be the way that she is.
Right.
Logical compassion is great, but then we really need it to be um, uh, an introspective process where we find why I was not comfortable with her acting the way that she does at any age that she is.
Mm. So going back to this, what we were talking about just before that, this narrative and its the identity that goes along with it about the role that I currently play in our house.
Yeah,
Um, I'm assuming that all of these questions and all of the in the moment um, inquiry is a step towards dismantling or dissolving a something that keeps the whole identity game going.
it is. Again, snowball under the heat lamp. So just shining the light of awareness on it, and all of this stuff starts to fall apart on its own. Um, it's only there because it's only there, and it only feels like identification because it hasn't been adequately seen for what it is enough times.
It seems like this is a very long term process.
It's different for everybody. For some
Mm,
people, it can be really brief. For some people, it can be a little bit longer term. It's don't get ahead of yourself and try to assume that you know how long it's going to take. Just take it day by day. You might have this assumption it's going to take the next 20 years, and then you have like one insight that just blows it all open. So, it can happen like that, or it can happen like that. And we just don't know. So instead of having an idea that it's going to take time, just look at, every insight as a new insight, as every opportunity as a new opportunity to look through it. And then it comes when it comes. It's not something that we're making happen or that we're forcing or any of that. It's a
sure.
natural seeing that happens or a natural falling away that happens, which is unpredictable at best. Um,
Right.
so just staying open to whatever comes. Um, the less anticipation you have and the less striving for it, ironically, the better it is.
Okay.
Because the more of that you have, the more it is in reinforcing the sense of the doer, reinforcing the sense of the one who is going to get the cookie.
Well, with that being said, it also seems like the more diligence a person has to remember to do this stuff as frequently as possible. I mean, that was the case last summer. With that moment of that initial seeing through, because I had been doing inquiry constantly while
Yeah,
walking around during the day. I mean, anytime something, oh, well, not anytime, but frequently, I mean, many times a day when something would come up, it was okay, so where is this person? Where is this
yeah,
self?
yeah.
Like
Yep.
Christiana Mickelberger says, locating it like you're trying to find your
Lost
keys.
keys, exactly. Yep.
Yeah. And, um, so it wasn't really too much of a surprise when there was that aha moment.
Yeah, yeah. Just keeping up with the inquiry and the awareness is so potent because you've lived for decades out of the assumptions. out of the belief in a self, and then or an assumption that what I'm experiencing right now must be a self. And now we're turning it around so that we're looking at that assumption as often as possible to just break through that illusion and seeing that what is here is not a self. It is just showing up the way that it's showing up, but it is not the idea that it is a self that is doing it is this unnecessary fabrication, is an unnecessary assumption. And it's just seeing it over and over again. For some people, it's like seeing it once and then that's enough. Other people, we have to see it over and over again. Some of us, we have to see it in all different ways. And then we get into all the other more subtle ways of identification that, because if you have that fundamental starting point that it is, all about me carrying everybody and I have to do this and I have to be this way or that way, then of course that assumption is the feeling of a self is such a thin thing. It's such a, a very vague feeling of being a self when you really get down to it, even into the further identification, the further fetters. It's very, very light and very, very subtle, but it's those ideas about me and the way that I have been and the way I have to be and the weight that's on my shoulders and all of this stuff that just gives that very vague, nebulous feeling of I am me, self. It's what gives that a sense of weight and density. And so the more of these illusions you can see through about how you think you are and about how you think your relationship is be- between you and the world and all of that stuff, every bit of that that can be seen through as an illusion helps make it so that that vague, gauzy film of a self is just more and more obviously an illusion.
Mm. Okay, so two things come to mind. One is I'm not really sure if it's a question or an observation. So in other words, I don't know how what the what sort of expectation there is about a response, but so often when doing inquiry and looking at this kind of stuff, when putting the attention on that, um, it's it seems like it's always, I'm reluctant to use that word, but I think that's true in this case, always a case of it's very immediately obvious that there's no one there.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, the way that it shows up is, kind of the internal talk is can't find anything.
Yeah, which is true. And that's great. But then there are other times that you're going about your life and it feels like I'm the one who has to keep the house together and I'm the one who has to do this or that. So is that I'm the one showing up someplace that you can't find when you do the other kind of inquiry? How is it that I am who is doing that is created? Where is that illusion being felt? The one who is going to do everything. And
Oh,
then
so it's not just a matter of not finding someone or there not being someone there. It's a case of how is that illusion being created?
I find it's really helpful to notice that because there's always the kind of feeling like, well, I haven't found it, but maybe it's lurking someplace else. But if you can really notice that, oh, okay, so there's what I'm taking right now to be the one who is doing it has a little bit of tingling in my neck, and there's, some tightness in my forehead, and there's a thought about all of the times that I've had to do this, and I can see my wife right now getting angry at me if I don't. And then I feel this little feeling in the pit of my stomach, and okay, now I feel that and break apart the experience into all of its components until you recognize that there is nothing there that's not those components.
Okay.
And then, of course, you found again and again that what is making up the sense of a self is just these constituent parts. It's just these various components that are being tied together in a way. And then just let that kind of sink in. Let that be that kind of open stillness that comes with that recognition. Just let that be for as long as it maintains. And then if a second later you feel like a self again who has to do something, again, tease it apart and just let that openness that follows just maintain.
And eventually that will do something about this, and you just touched on it a minute ago, this sense that if I just look hard enough, I'll find this thing that I'm trying to locate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's convincing on that level of grokking that I don't like the word. It's convincing on that deeper level.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And then you get those, like the no self states that you've experienced and that you recognize if you look for it, it's not there. Okay, so is it ever there? And if it ever feels like it's there, what are you feeling right now that is being misapprehended as a self?
Okay. That's a good way to put it. Are you feeling right now that's being misapprehended as a self? Hmm. It may seem, I don't know how this will strike either of you, but sometimes it's not just asking the question, it's asking the question the right way. Sometimes
Yeah,
how it's phrased really makes a tremendous amount of difference.
it does, especially with this stuff because it's so subtle and it's so easy to take it cognitively or um just be looking in kind of the right way, but you're just kind of, yeah, there are different ways of doing it where it's not exactly what we're pointing at. And then, of course, it just doesn't hit home because you're just not quite looking in the right direction. So, yeah.
Hmm. Well, one final thought
Yeah.
in all of this is, I sent you that email a few days ago, just a
Mhm.
reminder um, that it seems like Vedana
Yeah.
plays a role in stitching together someone who isn't there.
Yeah.
At least that's how it looked at the time when I was looking at it.
Yeah. And then feel how do you know the Vedana is there? What is the experience of positive, negative, neutral? How is that known?
How is that known? Well, that's a good question to continue asking, but it's interesting because um, what jumps to mind immediately is something that happened to me uh, some years back, where it was seen clearly in a moment that, and at the time I didn't understand it. I mean, it was this huge insight, but at the same time, I really didn't understand what it was telling me. It was years later, after acquiring more information about this stuff, more understanding, like, oh, that's what that was saying. But at the time, the phrase that popped into mind upon examining or seeing and feeling a feeling while in sitting meditation was feelings feel themselves.
Mm,
And
okay.
so that's the case here, is that the Vedana feels itself, which is, I think, part of the problem, because there's a logical part of the mind that says, well, that's not possible. Something can't feel itself. Obviously, there has to be some sort of percipient or someone or something that is apprehending it. They don't just, you know,
On the ultimate level, it brings us back to what we started talking about with Kristen with the Bahia Sutra stuff, where it is just sound hearing itself. There
Hmm.
again, it's an unnecessary dualism in the language, but it is that way. All of sensations and thoughts and stuff are feelings that are being felt essentially by themselves. Um, but there is something when we feel something, and that there is that sense of whether it's positive, negative, or neutral, where it feels like, I don't really like this sensation, or yeah, that's quite nice. Can I have more of that? Or nah, that's fine. And there is something to that uh before the what's the word that I'm looking for there? The expression of it, before that expression of, oh, this is nice, or I don't like this. Before that, there's a feeling of not liking or liking. But where is that being discovered? Where is it? Like, what is that? Is it just a thought? Is there something else that's in there saying, I don't like this? If we don't like it, is there another resistance somewhere in the body that seems to be contracting against it or causing some feeling of resistance? If we like it, does it feel like there's a feeling in the body like that's more expansive and open? And get really curious about what it actually means to feel that you like something or don't like it, or that it's pleasant or unpleasant, and recognize how that's known in itself. And then also getting really curious about the things that we feel are pleasant or unpleasant. And the more we dig into them, the more we recognize that actually everything is kind of neutral, or even in some cases possible to feel as positive. But it's like when a lot of what we sense as I don't like is taking things at face value, feeling this immediate sense of no towards it, this resistance, and then not investigating it deeply enough to have it actually morph and change and discover that it's actually just sensation, or actually there's something kind of nice about that sensation that I didn't notice before. um and see how that changes your experience of it, because nothing is fixed. There's nothing that is inherently positive, negative, or neutral in terms of our experience of it. It's all malleable.
Hmm. So then it's possible to experience what we call pleasant Vedana as more neutral.
Oh, yeah, I would say so. Yeah, if you really come into it, um, without anything that, depending on what it is, if it's a food or sex or whatever it is, there's a certain mental component which makes it more pleasurable than the actual physical sensation of what's there. So,
It's interesting you say that because I can recall that moment fairly clearly. I mean, where I was standing, what I was doing, and when it happened. And I can recall the mental response to it. It wasn't really verbal, but it was sort of this recognition of this feeling and kind of a, that's nice
yeah,
response.
yeah, yeah, and
And
then
it
come back to
never,
the actual sensation and see, is it really as nice, and why? And just get curious about it. It's not that we're saying that everything has to be neutralized, that you can't enjoy something or dislike a sensation or something like that, but it's just to get really curious about the fact that they are not inherent to the sensations. There is no inherent positive or negative or neutrality like that to any sensation. It's all in the way that we relate to it in a certain way. The what comes up around it. And it's curious to, okay, well, can I observe it like that? Can I see how it's showing up?
well, it was staring me in the face and I didn't even see it, that that it was mentally being processed.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely so.
Hmm. Okay.
Really good
Well,
question.
huh?
I said it was a really good question.
So, um, how would you um, simplify the process, I mean, as best as possible, how would you simplify the process of looking at this or doing the inquiry regarding um, looking at the things I'm doing with regards to the perceived role in this house that I occupy?
Yeah. So I think coming back to what the feeling is of the one who could be doing all of this stuff, play with the idea of if I don't do, I'm not going to do anything, and see what comes up in resistance to that. When you are doing something, see what comes up in terms of the positive feelings that you get from it, the feelings of resolution, the lack of, the resolution of guilt, or whatever would be there if you weren't doing it. Seeing what it's like every time that you perform an action, recognizing that it is one simple event, independent of anything else, and not weaving it into that storyline of here we go again. I've done this a billion times already. Why am I the only one who has to do it? Looking into what that feeling of responsibility really feels like, and and what thoughts and other things are supporting it.
Okay. You said what the feeling of responsibility feels like?
Yeah. How is that being felt in the body? And what thoughts or other components are supporting it and keeping it going?
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Amazing. I have to get ready for a
I
one-to-one before
understand.
long,
I under-
but this has been fantastic.
okay. Feeling slightly overwhelmed, but it's fine.
Yeah, good. That's a good place to be. It's a good place to be. We covered a lot.
It's just it's a lot to keep in
I,
mind.
I know, but that's why we record them. So, oh,
Right.
so,
Okay.
all
Well,
right.
I'll look forward to the recording when you finally are able to
It
send it.
should be up probably tonight. So,
Oh, okay.
yeah,
Cool.
if not tomorrow morning at the latest. But yeah.
Okay.
All right. Thank you
All
very
right.
much. It was
All
good
right. See
seeing
ya.
you. Yep.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.